Good evening and welcome to the 2017 Issaquah Candidate Forum presented by the Kiwanis Club of Issaquah and the Issaquah Cable TV Commission. I'm Donna Blankenship, a member of the Seattle Times editorial board, and I will be your moderator for this evening. Tonight we'll hear from two candidates for Issaquah Mayor and later meet the candidates for Issaquah City Council. The forum will begin with 2-minute opening statements from each mayoral candidate. Questions will then follow with 1-minute responses and 30-second rebuttals. The format for the second half of the evening will be a little different, so I'll tell you about that later. Our timer is seated in the front row and will raise a warning when 15 seconds remain and a stop signal when time is up. Questions have been gathered from the community. If an answer needs further clarification, I may follow up with another question. And if you go into talking points and don't answer the question, I will stop you and ask you to please answer the question. The audience has note cards. You're welcome to submit questions, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. Please don't direct questions at just one candidate. And if you raise your hand when you have a question that you're ready, it'll be collected. Please try to hold your applause until the end of each section of the forum. Try not to shout or cheer or jump up and down and do cartwheels during the forum. And turn off your cell phones if you could, the sound off anyway. The last question of each section will come from the candidates themselves. They'll ask the challenger a question. Each candidate will then have 1 minute for their closing remarks. So let's get started. This year, voters have a choice for Issaquah Mayor. After 4 years leading the city, Fred Butler is stepping down, and the current city council members, Paul Winterstein and Mary Lou Pauley, are seeking the full-time paid position of mayor. Let's keep things friendly and conversational, and we shall begin with Paul giving his 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, everyone, and I'm so glad that you're here this evening. My name is Paul Winterstein, and I've been living here in Issaquah for over 30 years. I was 23 years old when I got to Issaquah and was really fell in love with the place quickly. Eventually, I met my wife, who's here with me this evening. We raised our family on Squawk Mountain, and there's much about this place that for raising a family and for being in public service, there's much to really appreciate, and I've grown and gotten better over that time. When it comes to public service, about 10 years ago, my neighbors and I on Squawk Mountain petitioned the King County and the city to bring bus service to Squawk Mountain. And we weren't successful then, but we're about to be successful. That got me engaged, and then got me engaged with the city. And then I became lucky in 2008 to be a member. I was chosen to participate on the Human Services Commission. And that's where I really started engaging a little bit more, learning about the city, learning about the issues and concerns with the citizens within the city. Then in 2011, I was lucky. I wanted to work on behalf of everybody within Issaquah, and you, the citizens, elected me to the city council, and then 2 years ago, I was reelected. And so it's an honor to serve you here in this capacity. I'm running for mayor because this city is at a very unprecedented time in its history. The population of this city, the population of this entire region, and all the pressures that puts on everything, the pressure it puts on our infrastructure, the pressure it puts on the environment, and the pressure that it puts on schools, the pressure it puts on our ability to provide public safety. Those are very, very important issues, and we need a mayor who's going to be able to tackle all of these. But the number one reason I'm running for mayor, because I want to work with all of you and our regional partners to fix traffic, and the number one focus thing I'm going to have is unplugging the Issaquah-Hobart Road so we can get this town rolling again. Thank you.
Mary Lou?
Thank you, Donna. And thank you all for coming on one of probably our nicest fall nights. This must be really important if you all chose to come in here. My name is Mary Lou, and I've lived in Issaquah since 1993. From the first day I got here, I started volunteering and have been volunteering in the city ever since. Probably the best volunteer job I have is when I decided to run for elected office and have been sitting on council for the last 4 years. My background is in civil engineering. I've worked as both a public works engineer and an environmental engineer. The thing that really drew me to volunteering in 1993 was that this was a great place to be. This was a place of opportunity, a small town nestled in the hills. I think it was early on in '94 I learned about the Growth Management Act, and I recognized that Issaquah was on the urban side of the line, and while it was pleasant and quaint and wonderful, growth was going to come to us as well as Seattle. So we were on the side that was going to change. I've decided to run for mayor because I am really kind of shocked at how we say we're managing growth in our town. You know, in the last 5 to 10 years, we've grown at a rapid pace, but in one area only. We've added housing. We haven't dealt with our transportation issues. We haven't got enough school seats for children. We have not grown as a balanced community, and as I knock on doors, what I hear from you is this is not what you expected. So yes, there was a plan. Execution isn't working. We need to do things differently. We need to, as a community, make sure that when growth is happening, a new development comes, you see community benefits come with it, and that's not happening right now. By the year 2020, we will have as many housing units as the state thought we would accommodate by the year 2031. So we have really grown rapidly. If you've sensed it and felt it, it's because the data shows it's there. I want to be mayor because it's time to take a pause, go back, look at why we're here, and change the way we're doing things. This community deserves more. You deserve more, and I hear that from you when I'm at your door. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so remind you about the question format. I'm going to ask a question. You will have a minute to answer. Then the other candidate will have a minute to answer. And then let me make sure I'm telling you the right thing. Yes, and then there'll be 30-minute rebuttal.
30 minutes?
30 seconds, sorry. Good catch.
Lucky you.
Yeah, 30-second rebuttal by the person who answered first. So Mary Lou, you get to answer the first question first. What major accomplishments would you expect from the city's economic development efforts in the next 2 years?
That is a great question. I think in watching as the city has grown, especially over the last 5 years, one thing we have not been able to attract to town like we thought we would be the jobs that come with growth. So while we were a small city outside of Seattle, a place where people came to live, to go to Seattle to work, part of the whole growth management equation in order to build a balanced community is to also have the jobs. We're not getting the jobs. And so while we have an economic development office and we have an economic vitality commission that citizens volunteer for, we are not becoming that balanced community that we thought we would be. I would hope that we'll be able to attract at least one more large corporate business, or even potentially somebody who would be looking to create a campus here, such as Costco did. But if we're really going to be the live, work, play city, that's what we have to get done. And I hope we could get that done in the next 2 years.
Okay, Paul, do you want me to repeat the question?
I think I got it. Thank you. So I think the issue is, are we experiencing the type of economic growth and opportunity that people would like to see? And we live in a global economy. What happens in our city is largely affected also by what happens all around us. Fortunately, we have a very good jobs-based economy here in the Puget Sound region, and we have to understand our proper role within that as a city. Right now, Issaquah is primarily a place for people to live and raise their families, and most of us travel outside of town to find the good-paying jobs that allow us to live here. So I think Economic Development Division for the next 2 years within the city has to focus on those types of businesses and economic opportunities that will recognizes the type of community that we are and brings in the services that are needed most by the families that live here.
Okay, Mary Lou, do you want to take your 30 seconds?
Wait, that was.
Oh, what?
Sure.
Isn't that how it works? Did I get it wrong?
I don't know because we don't have the rules.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I'll say it again. So my understanding is you each get a minute, and then the person who answered first gets to rebut for 30 seconds.
Okay. And you alternate between Paul and I.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I guess as mayor, what would be really important to me for our economic development group to do is to support me in my opinion that when we are looking at how our city's going to grow, we are being asked as a council to consider conversions, where somebody who has purchased land for commercial opportunities now wants to come and ask the city to build housing on it. We've been asked that before, and the community knows that that's coming. I want economic vitality, our Economic Development Commission to weigh in on to weigh in on that and support me in my opposition to any of those conversions. Thank you.
Okay, question number 2, Paul, you answer this one first.
Okay.
What kind of specific changes should be made to the Old Town sub-area plan before the building moratorium is lifted?
All right, thank you. Old Town, we're in Old Town, and the sub-area plan, Old Town is a defined area within Issaquah that has its own comprehensive plan. It defines the building structures and the nature of the community. What's wonderful in this process of redevelopment that we've gone through of this sub-area plan is that members of the community have stepped forward. The city did a survey, had a number of meetings. They were well attended, input was given, and some of the very significant changes I think that are coming out of this really bear the fact that I think there's a recognition that of all our communities, and I've been into all the communities within Issaquah, that Old Town, its character may be under the most threat by redevelopment, the tear down of existing homes, smaller homes, and the building of larger homes that don't fit within the neighborhood. So I think the most important change that's being considered, and I'm very interested and want to bring this to fruition as well, is a redefinition of what's allowable. When you tear a home down, and if somebody wants to rebuild something, it has to fit, it has to look good, it has to fit good, and it has to work for the citizens already there.
Mary Lou, you want to talk about what specific changes you would like to see to the sub-area plan before the building moratorium is lifted?
Thanks, and it does help when you repeat the question. So the plan for Old Town is not actually wrapped up in the moratorium. That is not one of the things that has to be completed before the moratorium is done. However, we've started the process anyway. We were going to look at the Old Town sub-area plan before the moratorium was introduced. What I have heard from citizens are several concerns. One has to do with building heights on Front and Sunset. Currently, the zoning allows buildings to be, I think, 4 to 6 stories tall. We have a lot of 2, maybe 2.5 story tall buildings in town, and with those on Front and Sunset, you can walk the trails and sidewalks and still see the hillsides. I am opposed to the building height that we have now. I would like to join the community consensus that the building height on Sunset and Front Street is too high. It should be dropped to 3-story maximum. Within Old Town itself, what I'm hearing about redevelopment is that 3-story houses in Old Town should not be allowed. People were looking for 2 stories maximum, and also looking at whether or not subdividing lots into multiple houses is still an acceptable approach for density. Thank you.
Paul, do you have a rebuttal?
Thank you. I do. An additional comment. In my opening statement, I talked about how the character and how the nature of this town really gripped me. And most people I speak with agree that in some way, shape, or form, it is Old Town, is this part of town, centered around Sunset, but also Front Street, that really is the model of the spirit and the nature of the city of Issaquah. Preserving it into the future, as far as we can see, is very, very critical. And that's why the participation from all the residents in this process is so critical. I'm open to it. I'm looking forward to completing that with all of you.
Okay, question number 3. How should the region come together to effectively address regional traffic? What is your vision and how would you implement it?
Thank you, Donna. So I think one of my big disappointments with the Growth Management Act was that I expected the state and the county to do what they should have been doing while we were addressing how our cities would grow, and that was to provide us the links between the cities. So we are woefully behind in transportation projects. Last winter, our mayor did convene a regional conference of mayors to talk about the issue. I'm excited that we're doing that. I think that's the right way to do it, but we're focusing all of our efforts on what I would call the north side of town and the big city side of the picture. Our real pain in town is Front Street. There are 30,000 vehicles a day on it. 80% of the vehicles using that leave I-90 to points south of 18. And that is, we need to join a coalition of Southeast King County cities and work with them on addressing this issue. It should not be SR Front Street. There are state routes and county roads to get people home. No state route Front Street.
Paul, how do you think the region should come together to effectively address regional traffic? And what is your vision and how would you implement it?
Thank you. You know, it was, Mayor Butler did call that Transportation Summit last fall, which was great. And largely that was due upon my suggestion. I sat here in a council meeting right over there, and we were listening to some issues. And I said, you know what? I thought to myself, we understand the issues impacting traffic in Issaquah, but does the county know it from our perspective? Does the state know it from Issaquah's perspective? Does Sammamish and other cities around it really understand it from our perspective? And I challenge the mayor, it's time we bring people together and make sure that they understand, because it's largely, it's what we do, but it is the pass-through traffic through Issaquah is what is choking our city. So it was very important that the county understood the role of the Hobart Road, that the state understood the role of State Route 18 and of State Route 900. And so I think that has been a great start. And as your mayor, continuing to pursue that, specifically unplugging and working with the county to unplug the Hobart Road so we can help families get home and when they expect to is job number one.
Mary Lou, do you have a rebuttal?
I do, thank you. I mean, this is one of the areas where Paul and I are just not in agreement. I do not believe we should be converting Issaquah-Hobart Road into a new highway. We have highways in Southeast King County that have never been built out. Commuter traffic needs to be on highways. We do not need to create one through a new valley in a rural area that was never intended to have one. So this is one of the areas where as mayor, I would employ a totally different approach. I don't want to see more cars moving through town. I want to see less cars on Front Street. And so making a highway in the valley is that's not something I would support.
Okay, question number 4. What sections of the comprehensive plan should be reviewed and what changes would you suggest? I forgot who went first. Okay, Paul's turn.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
No, yes, because you had the rebuttal.
'Cause I
So
rebutted.
Paul's turn, yeah.
We'll get this.
Okay, so I did not expect that question. This is a good one. You know, the comprehensive plan is, if you're not familiar with it, every city who manages their growth under what's known as the Growth Management Act, must develop a comprehensive plan. It defines your housing strategy, your infrastructure strategy, what you're going to do for the environment, for traffic, all of that. And I think that we already touched upon one, and it's being revised right now. Maybe you didn't know, but the Old Town sub-area plan is an element of our comprehensive plan. So there's a reason that is being reworked right now, because it was recognized. As I sat up here as council president a number of years ago, I challenged my other colleagues on the council, are we overlooking Old Town? That actually led to council goals that said, let's take a look at the Old Town sub-area plan. And that's what we talked about earlier, is another look at the Old Town sub-area plan. I think it's under work right now. It is the most critical one that we need to do. And I'm sure I'll think of some more in my rebuttal.
So Mary Lou, what changes in the comprehensive plan need to be reviewed and what changes would you suggest?
Thank you. So the two sections that I would spend the most time on in my first year as mayor, number one is transportation. I'm sure you've all read the comprehensive plan. It's really good bedtime reading. I actually enjoy reading it. One of the issues I have with the transportation section in terms of light rail, there are 2 governing statements in there right now that I disagree with. One says that the light rail coming to Issaquah is not the end of the line, that we're going to make plans to get light rail from Issaquah all the way to Redmond. That's not something I think we've ever discussed in town with our community, and many of you are probably not aware of that. There's another part in our transportation section of the comprehensive plan that says we're going to have a sound transit maintenance yard in town. Well, we're 10 square miles. We're not Bellevue. We're not that big. We can't do that. And I won't get to my second section.
Okay, Paul, your rebuttal?
The transportation section, I agree, does need to be revised. And as I've said before, and I'm going to repeat as many opportunities as I can, is that it is very clear, especially as I talk to people who live in the southern part of town, they want to be able to get home to their families at a predictable time. They want to be, if they're traveling home on Newport Way or Front Street or whatever way they travel through town, they want to get home in a predictable amount of time. I think it's very critical that our comprehensive plan clearly articulate that the primary objective of our planning over the future is working with the county to unplug the Hobart Road and with the state to unplug SR 18 so those who would otherwise take the Hobart Road have a safe, quick way to go home via SR 18. I think that's the number one change.
Okay, Mary Lou, here's one for you. The city's lobbyist has helped educate state legislators about Issaquah's needs and has secured millions of dollars for local projects. What should be the lobbyist's goal for the 2018 legislative session?
Good question. Excellent question. You know, I think one of the big issues that the legislature is going to be tackling is a new look at the Growth Management Act. And I think Issaquah really needs to get its story told at the legislature in terms of the impacts of what's happened with the current format of the act. I believe in growth management. I believe in the urban growth boundary, but we have not executed well either as a state, as a region, and even at the local level as a city. So that should be very high on its agenda. One of the other issues that we're facing constantly, and it's a recurring issue, is that there are certain revenues that the states collect and distribute out to cities. Over the last few years, as the state has been trying to, or sessions, as the state has been trying to fill holes, they've been cutting back on those revenues. And that impacts cities, and that impacts our local taxpayers. And those would be two issues that I'd like to see them work on next year. Thank you.
Paul, what would you like to see our lobbyists' top goals be for the 2018 legislative session?
Thank you. I have a little more investigation and do on this particular topic. I'm sure everybody's aware that our legislature supposedly solved McCleary, right? They came up with a new formula for funding schools. That has a dramatic impact on every single property owner in this city. We are one of our Issaquah school districts, and the property taxes that we pay to them provide quite a bit of valuable service to this, to our families, to our kids. But there's been a lot of talk that this new state property tax increase for school funding is going to have a dramatic impact on every single property owner. It's going to raise our prices dramatically. And is that fair? I'm not sure yet. Schools are important, kids are important, but I think it's very important with our lobbyists and with families and leaders within our community that we work with the school district and the state to really understand the impact of this McCleary decision and what it means to the property taxpayers of our city.
Mary Lou, do you have a rebuttal?
Sure. Just one quick thing to add. I think that we've been very successful with our lobbyists over the last few years, getting some really big projects moved up on the schedule. The interchange at Highway 18 and 90 now has been moved forward years. That's great. We need to continue that. I think that's one of the strengths of having a lobbyist in Olympia. However, there are things that we could do under local control, and we need to focus on that as well. And where we end up moving traffic back onto commuter routes, the state will then begin to notice that the demand to complete those highways in Southeast King County is huge. And hopefully our lobbyists will be able to get other projects to move forward on the list as well. Thanks.
Okay, this one's for Paul first. Let's talk about homelessness. What would your administration do to alleviate homelessness in Issaquah, keeping in mind the increased need for social services, crime, whatever, in our parks, whatever?
So that's a great question. The causes of homelessness are very complex. But I subscribe to the philosophy, which many within the region do as well, that homelessness should be one time, it should be rare, and it should be brief. Now, we have to work, as we are starting to do more, with the King County Housing Authority and other housing providers, such as Imagine Housing. So one time, if somebody lands on the street, there has to be an intake system. We work with various human services agencies that are very good at intaking those families and individuals who find themselves without a permanent roof over their heads. We have to make sure that those programs from those agencies, like HopeLink, like Friends of Youth, continue are funded so we can capture them then. To make it brief, there has to be housing options, even if they're temporary. The city can do more in that area. I'm very interested in the concept of tiny housing as a way to temporarily help people transition out. And so, I mean, there's things that we can do with housing, and there are things that our partners that we can help do as well to help fight homelessness.
Mary Lou, what do you think Issaquah should do to alleviate homelessness?
I think people would be surprised to hear the number of homeless families that we have in Issaquah that actually have kids in the Issaquah School District. But there are ways that we can partner with the school district, with the police, and with our fire department, where as they encounter people in these situations, we have to find more pathways to make connections to those that provide the housing, or those that even provide the temporary housing. So we need a community-based plan of early intervention, where once we discover that somebody is in a situation that they need help, we have a way to get them to the correct sources. Right now, we are sort of all working on our own little silos, and I don't know that we've pulled it all together in a comprehensive way so that both the school district, the police, and the fire are all working on the same page. That's something we need to do, and that's something I'm willing to tackle in my administration. Thanks.
Paul, do you have a rebuttal on that question?
Not so much a rebuttal. It's a critical issue. It affects all communities. My family and I have been serving at the Issaquah Meals Program for over 25 years. We've served many meals to families that are in need, seniors on fixed income, but also men living homeless in the woods around us. I have a deep sympathy for those that are affected by this, and I think, again, those programs that I mentioned earlier that provide the services, that intake them, can get them into a system to help them overcome whatever their issue is. This city, and as a mayor, I will continue to support those programs.
Okay, next question for Mary Lou first. How would you as mayor ensure that Issaquah is strongly represented regionally?
Thanks. It's been an evolving process on the council over the last couple of years how to figure out how to do this better, because we are a city of 38,000 in a region of many, many millions. But a lot of the decisions that are made by other jurisdictions or higher levels of government than us. The mayor serves on several really key positions. So there are opportunities for the mayor to apply for things like Sound Transit Board, Cascade Water Alliance, which is one of our water providers. And I believe that as a mayor, while the duty is to make sure that everything is running and execution of the council's policy is happening, you've got to be out in the region. You've got to be at these important tables, making sure that as the region is discussing policy, somebody is there saying, are these good decisions for Issaquah? Does it make our community better? So I commit to doing that and stepping up and filling those positions all throughout the county and the region. Thanks.
What would you do to ensure that Issaquah is strongly represented regionally?
I think that's a great question. When I was here who remembers in the mid-'80s when you drove on I-90 into Seattle, there was a sign that said temporary I-90. That used to really puzzle me. How was I-90 temporary? It looked pretty real to me as it crossed Mercer Island. But what I didn't know at that time is that the leaders of Mercer Island actually had their heels dug in. They were fighting against the federal highway authority, about how to rebuild I-90, for the benefit of their city. Well, I had no idea at that time that they were going to get something cut 40 foot deep, 8 crossings over it, parks on top of it. It's a great indication of when leaders are on top of what's happening regionally and know who are making decisions that affect their city, are aware and can really fight for a good outcome. For comparison, we have the same number of highway lane miles. We have a total of 4 crossing, and the noise around Issaquah is very large. I was actually the one who recognized that we did not have enough influence in the region and proposed the creation of what Mary Lou referred to as our regional agenda. And so that is identify the key issues, what are the forums, what are the boards, who is on them, and making sure that we're at the table, such as Mercer Island was 30 years ago, to influence the outcomes to Issaquah's benefit.
Do you have a rebuttal?
Thanks, a short one. You know what? It was really important to our council when Paul came up with this plan for the regional agenda. He is extremely good at looking at process and getting process in place. What I've been able to do in my 3 years on council is to get some of those regional seats and to have a strong voice and to be an influencer and to move up into leadership in some of those regional organizations. I've got a proven track record of being a strong voice for Issaquah and actually a respected voice that ends up getting in the leadership on those organizations. So there are lots of more challenging ones that are out there, but I look forward to serving you on those. Thanks.
Okay, so now comes the time when each candidate is going to ask their opponent a question. There won't be any rebuttals on this one.
What?
All right. So, Paul, you get to go first. What is your question for Mary Lou?
Yes, thank you. So, Mary Lou, I have a question about transparency. I'm very interested in what your standard is for transparency. You in this room have done a good job of making sure that our city staff provides all the necessary data in our packet so the public knows what kind of decisions we've made. And yet there was an occasion earlier this month with no information in a packet. You proposed hiring a new person, which is a long-term commitment, and there was no information. Nobody had an idea what was being considered. I'd like to know what your standard for transparency is.
Thanks. So the really interesting part about being on council is it's a real privilege and honor to sit up here and do the policy making and look at all the information, but a lot of times you don't have all the data in front of you. And so Paul's right that I've been one of the inquisitors who, if we don't have enough information, then I want the answers. I want all of it laid out on the table before we make a decision. So my standard for transparency is that when we're considering something, that answers to every single council member's question should happen before we make a vote. In the case of the transportation planner, the council had reviewed a bill, the previous session or the previous 2 weeks earlier, talked about our intent to form a transportation commission and that it would require staffing resources of a transportation planner and some clerical help. And we got to discuss that at council, and everybody knew that if we formed the board, these resources were going to be required. So I brought up, even at that time when we talked about forming the board, that we also should be considering the positions as well. Did it in public and did it on camera. And so I'm really committed that we have all of the information in front of us, that we have the discussion, and that when the council members are ready, we take our vote. Thanks.
Okay, so now, Mary Lou, you get to ask Paul a question.
Okay. So Paul, thank you for your 6 years of service on council. My question is, on your time on council, what vote or decision did you make that you are most proud of, and what vote or decision did you make that you now regret?
It actually, the issue I'm most proud of might surprise you. When I first started sitting out in those chairs and watching the council work, 10 years ago, and realized, hey, I may aspire to play that role, to serve the public in that way. And as I got more and more involved, and then I got on the council, I had the opportunity to serve as deputy council president. The deputy council president sits right here or right here, adjacent to the mayor and the president. But the thing I'm most proud of, when I was elected by my peers as council president, I made the decision at that time. It was very critical. I asked Council Member Stacy Goodman, who had been chosen as deputy president. I said, Stacy, you and I are in on everything. The council, we set all the policy, we set the budget, we set the direction of this. It was very important that we worked as a team. I've been in many situations where 1 + 1 = 3, and I think now the effectiveness of the council and the deputy president also bring that new effectiveness to the city council. That is the choice that I'm most proud of. I have time.
Okay, so now you each have 1 minute for closing remarks, and since we started with Paul going first, Mary Lou gets to give her 1 minute closing first, and then Paul will give 1 minute.
Thank you, Donna. So I think the question before you tonight is, you've heard from both Paul and I several times now, and I think what you have is you've got two qualified candidates here. You can match up our qualifications. They might be slightly different, and that's going to be a really hard way for anybody to distinguish between the two of us and decide. You know, what I hope you take away from tonight is that you have two qualified candidates with two very different paths forward. I really believe that Issaquah has grown faster and in a way that the community is not comfortable with, and that we can do better. And I want to change the course, and I want to try out different solutions and different tactics, because I feel like we've let you down. Tonight, you've heard that we are different in some ways, but what I want you to know is that I really have heard that while you love it here, just like I still love it here, we haven't dealt with our challenges, and we need to try and get traffic under control. And that doesn't mean making it flow better. It means getting it off of Front Street. Those are critical differences, so you get to choose. Thanks for coming tonight.
All your closing.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for being here. This is a job, and I have a real passion for it. I've always done the work, and I get myself educated. I know I don't always have the answers. But if to choose me as your mayor, you know that I'm going to bring people together with divergent points of views, and we're going to get together and collaboratively work together to identify the way forward. I believe in that. That's how you get 1 + 1 = 3. So there's that method that I think is very important. Well, as I'm out there door knocking, one of the common things I'm asked is, Paul, what's the difference between you and Mary Lou? I think, as Mary Lou just alluded to, at one level you can see a lot of similarities, and I think there are two important differences I want you to think about. The first is kind of our state of the assessment of the city. You know, from my perch, I see it a little bit differently. I'm kind of with a lot of people. I spoke in the Highlands just yesterday. You know, they really like it here. They know we have issues, but they want a positive outlook out there who's going to work with others and bring people together to work those issues. And the second difference is I'm going to work with the county and unplug Issaquah Hobart Road.
Well, thank you so much for your remarks tonight. Also, thank you for agreeing to serve our city. The citizens of Issaquah are very lucky to have you, and your service is appreciated. Thank you for being here, and thank you to the audience for being here as well. We're now going to take a 10-minute break while we prepare to meet the candidates for the Issaquah City Council.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you.
Part 2 of the 2017 Candidate Forum presented by the Kiwanis Club of Issaquah and Issaquah Cable TV Commission. I'm Donna Blankenship, a member of the Seattle Times editorial board, and I am your moderator for this forum. During the next part, we will begin with 2-minute statements from the 3 unopposed candidates. Actually, it'll just be 2 because the third one is not here. If you have questions that you want to be asked during the rest of the evening when we have question and answer with the candidates running for council who are opposed, please write something on a card and raise your hand and it'll get picked up. So let's begin with 2-minute statements from the unopposed candidates for Issaquah City Council, and we'll begin with Stacy Goodman, who is running for position 5.
Thank you. I love serving on the Issaquah City Council. The past 6.5 years serving on the council has been so rewarding in so many ways. And for the most part, it's really, really fun digging really deep into the issues for the most part. What I love most is the opportunity to be able to make some sort of a difference. I'm really proud in even the small role that I played in the tremendous renovations that have happened at Lake Sammamish State Park and the formation of the Friends Group. My interest in revitalizing the park sparked something in Senator Mark Mullet when he was on the Issaquah City Council. Mark went on to the state legislature, and he became the park's #1 champion, which led to the legislature spending millions of dollars at the park. And that park is now a fantastic place. I hope you visit it if you haven't recently. As you all know, we are in a development moratorium right now. When I started hearing how unhappy people were with the type of development that we were getting, and I was really frustrated myself, quite frankly, I proposed the development moratorium. The moratorium gave the council and the city staff an extraordinary amount of work to do, but we really had no other option if we wanted to right the ship. I'm actually very proud of the bold move that I took. People who know me know that I am never one to shy away from a challenge. Our number one challenge in our community is transportation. And the reason it's so challenging is because we cannot solve regional traffic issues on our own. But we really haven't actually tried to even make a dent in the problem on our own streets. The transportation bond was a step, but we haven't really taken another step. But once this moratorium is behind us, I am ready to take on the transportation challenge. Early next year, we will have our Transportation Advisory Board up and running, a board that will be dedicated to our number one issue, and that's very exciting. I really look forward to serving for another term so I can continue to be proactive about getting things done. I thank you very much for your support, and please remember to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Tola Martz, running for position 7, is going to give his 2-minute introduction.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the Kiwanis for putting this event together. I really appreciate a chance to get before you and talk a little bit about why I'm coming back to the council for a third term. I came to this community in 2003 to build rockets for Jeff Bezos, and I did that for about a decade, but a little ways into it, I decided that it was really important to make sure that Issaquah was going to manage its growth effectively and handle the transition from a growth city to sort of a more steady state, which we're getting to slowly but surely. I had come from a town in Minnesota that had a harder time managing its growth, and I decided pretty early on that what was most important to me and where I felt was the biggest indicator of health in our community was workforce housing and living wage jobs. And this really gets at, I think somebody said earlier, sort of balancing how you grow as a city. I think it's really important that the people who live here be able to work here, and the people who work here be able to live here. We've made some progress in that over the last 8 years. I'm running unopposed. I ran unopposed in 2013. I think that with workforce housing, there is an understanding now that there wasn't even 2 or 3 years ago that while we need to do things specifically for low-income housing, this workforce housing is sort of the donut hole in the middle, and it's the folks where maybe you've got a cop and a firefighter, or a teacher and a police officer, but it's the folks who want to come and live in this community and partake of the schools and be engaged in their community, but aren't independently wealthy. They can't afford $1 million McMansion up on the hill, and so it's important that we have places for them to live. It's important that we have jobs that people can live on here, that they can afford to live in this community, and that's how one of the ways you can reduce traffic is if people can stay in this community in the morning, if we don't have to ship people in and ship people out. That's what I'm going to focus on in the next 4 years with your help. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to take a minute for candidates to switch seats while we prepare to learn more about the candidates for positions 1 and 2. For position 1, voters will be choosing between Christopher Ray and Brian Weinstein. For position 2, we have Richard Swanson and Mariah Batiste. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening statements, and then we'll follow with questions. This time, there won't be any rebuttals. The 4 candidates will all be asked the same question, and they'll each have a minute to answer each of the regular questions. So 2 minutes for opening statements and 1 minute for their questions. The questions have come from community members, and the last question will come from the candidates themselves, with each asking their challenger a question. Each of them will then have 1 minute for closing remarks. So let's get started. We're going to go left to right for opening statements. So start with Christopher. one of the candidates for position 1.
You call me Chris because the only person who calls me Christopher is my mother when I'm in trouble.
Okay, I will try not to be like your mother.
And I hope I'm not in trouble yet.
You might be.
Good evening. My name is Chris Ray, and I'm running for Issaquah City Council position number 1. I want to start by thanking all of you for being here and being involved. I think that is super important. I want to thank the Issaquah Kiwanis and the Cable TV Commission for putting this on. It is a great opportunity for us to get together and have a dialogue. Like many people in the community, I've become concerned about what's happening with Issaquah, and I've talked to hundreds of people over the last several months, talked about what their priorities were and what they see as the future of Issaquah. What I hear in these conversations doesn't conform to what I see happening in our city. And we need to change our city government and our priorities so that we can align to and understand what the citizens of this city want. It's really clear that the two biggest problems we face right now are traffic and development. I don't think you'll hear a lot of disagreement on those, but what it really comes down to on the city council is electing people who can get things done. And I have a background that's a little bit different than most of the other people who are sitting on the city council that I think is very applicable to the work we do. I've spent the last 20-plus years working with state and local governments around the country, helping them to become outstanding governments. I spent some time working in Clark County, Nevada, helping them to redesign their child welfare system so we could get some good outcomes for kids. I worked with Dow Constantine and Fred Jarrett at King County to help them implement their LEAN program, which resulted in significant improvements in government operations and in employee satisfaction. And recently I worked with Kathleen O'Toole, Seattle's police chief, to help them to improve policing operations in Seattle. My work has taught me a lot about what great government is and what makes a great city. The most important role of the City Council is to represent and advocate for you, the people of Issaquah. It's about listening, it's about holding everyone accountable, and it's about advocating and doing what is best for all of you. We need an active and forward-looking City Council. We must work diligently to address the priorities of today, traffic and development, but we also must focus on the problems of tomorrow. I'm seeking this position because I think I have a vision for Issaquah that aligns with the people that I've talked to and can help us maintain the quality of life in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, you go next.
My name is Brian Weinstein. I'm running for Issaquah City Council, position number 1. My friends and neighbors keep asking me about Issaquah and where we're headed. Like you, I want a city council that listens and works hard, makes things better in this beautiful place we all call home. I've been advocating for our community since 2003 and know that being successful will take all of our collective voices. I want to make Issaquah a better place, but not lose what brought us all here in the first place. That's why I'm asking for your vote. Tonight, I promise to speak directly and honestly, but I won't be able to solve any problem in 60 seconds or with a simple yes or no answer. Because we have a challenge in Issaquah. We have to do better. There are examples everywhere of how our city government is doing things to us instead of for us, and eroding our quality of life in the process. Take, for example, the just released Issaquah-Hobart Road Study. No citizen involvement, just stakeholders crafting an answer. Or if King County property in the Highlands should become a school. No community engagement, just parents left out of the process. And then they wonder why we howl and don't trust them when something goes wrong with our water bills, or there are landslides in a housing development, or a little child or a cyclist get run over in a city street, or a hearing examiner says they failed to follow their own rules. How many of our problems are created by our city, creating crisis and mess one after the other, and then coming up with some kind of half-baked way of fixing it with some kind of compromise we must accept? Kids versus streets, trees versus schools, taxes versus safety, or growth versus quality of life. I'm running for city council because our city needs to do better, and it needs to start today.
Thank you. Richard?
Hi, everybody. My name is Richard Swanson. I'm running for Issaquah City Council seat number 2, and I want to thank everyone for being here. It's great to see so many civic-minded people in the audience and viewers at home. Thank you for the Kiwanis for organizing this candidate forum. I moved to Issaquah in 2006. My kids both went to Issaquah High School. My daughter went on to Gonzaga, my son to Seattle Pacific University. My wife works at Bellevue Pottery Barn. In case anybody's looking for a new sofa, I know just the person to talk to. I worked for over 10 years at King 5 in Seattle. I was the program director there. As program director, we were awarded the Service to America Award in 2015. It was a very prestigious award from the National Association of Broadcasters. We partnered with over 100 nonprofit groups around the area, and we held over 85 public events. I was a very busy guy in 2015. But the process taught me three key things. It taught me to listen well. Listening well is a key component to success. In fact, it's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. First, seek to understand before being understood. The second thing it taught me to do is to ask hard questions. And the most important question is why? Why are we doing the things that we do? Have we done the hard work to find that answer? Because if you know the answer to why, the other questions become a whole lot easier to answer. And the third thing is to hold people accountable. When some people make an agreement to follow through on something, you've got to hold them responsible for the things that they've agreed to do. I was actually recruited by the HOA. I'm the president of the Tallis HOA. I was recruited by the HOA to run for this position because many of us were very upset over the landslide we had up in Tallis. And I'll have more to say on how that all folds into the equation as the evening goes on. Thank you.
Hey, Mariah.
Hi, my name is Mariah Batiste, and I just wanted to start by thanking everyone for coming to the forum tonight. It's just amazing to see this kind of engagement from the community, so thank you for your time, and thanks to the Kiwanis group for hosting this. Issaquah is home. I've been here for almost 18 years. I've been a homeowner here. I have owned a small business here for 18 years. My kids have gone through the school district here, and I've also been a passionate volunteer. I started out in the schools and the PTSA, co-chairing and chairing a variety of community outreach programs and working with my kids and all of their friends to teach them about giving back to their community. And that's really what I'm very passionate about. That's why I'm sitting here right now. Then I moved on to the Economic Vitality Commission. I was on the commission for 3 years. I was also on the Human Services Commission for the city of Issaquah. I was a commissioner there and then became the chair of that commission. I now sit on Issaquah City Council. It's a little strange to be sitting in this seat right here because Stacy's usually here and I'm usually where Donna is. But I really, that move over to City Council has just been a logical progression for me because of my time giving back to the city and being involved in a lot of the city issues. So we're just at a really critical time in the city right now. I feel like some of the decisions that are being made right now are so incredibly important. I am the newest council member on council, and I have had a chance to ramp up and do the deep dives and understand the kind of critical issues that we need to be looking at. We need to be focused on creative solutions, and now is the time to really tackle that. I'm going to talk a lot about some of those solutions coming up, but I would love to have your vote in November so I can keep doing the hard work that we have been doing. Thank you.
Okay, now comes the complicated part. We're going to do a little bit of a square dance here. I'll try to keep track, but you're going to each take turns in a different order to answer your questions. So I'll repeat them, though. Okay, the first question is, the city's job is to plan for growth, and the school district's job is to plan for schools in order to accommodate that growth. Given that some Issaquah schools are so overcrowded and suitable land is becoming more scarce, what can the city and the school district do to work together to better plan for future growth? And Brian gets to answer first.
Thank you. I think you answered your question with the question. The city and the school district need to start working together. In a lot of states, other than Washington State, if you're going to have a land development, you have to have land reserved for a school. It's part of your critical infrastructure. One of the things that Issaquah doesn't have in its comprehensive plan, which describes how we're going to grow, is anything about schools. And the schools, we all know, we need to have schools. We've grown dramatically. We're going to meet our 2030 population goal decades ahead of schedule, and we haven't made any provisions for schools. So yes, we need to start talking to the school district, and parents need to be part of that process as well as the greater community. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that if there's a parcel of land that King County has available, that of course it should be made available if it's suitable for schools. But we need to have a process that works, and we need to have communication amongst all parties to make sure that it's suitable and that it's going to be fitting in with how Issaquah is going to be.
Okay. Richard, what do you think the city and the school district can do better to plan together for growth?
Well, my number one criticism of city council is I don't think that there's a good deal of communication either to or from the city. One of the ideas that I hope to accomplish on city council is I hope to set up an advisory panel made up of community organizers and homeowner presidents throughout our region. You know, when you think about the Plateau or Tallis or Cougar Mountain, each one of those communities has distinct needs.
What does this have to do with schools?
Well, I'm getting there.
Okay.
So in my view, what we need is a better process of listening to the community. Where are the needs the greatest? And what are the spaces that we can organize and get feedback from the community and begin the process of identifying the parcels of land that will work best for the community. Very oftentimes, these things are done at the last minute under a lot of pressure, and the choices are limited. Better to plan and listen first, and you get better outcomes.
Okay. Thank you, Mariah. How do you think the city and the school district should work together to plan for growth?
Well, in regard to the question, I guess I just wanted to repeat, that's very true, and I think it's important to understand that the schools are responsible for building schools, and the council is responsible for doing things like zoning and having those sorts of answers available. So this is about partnership development between the schools and the city, doing a great job with that partnership. I am a proponent of looking at urban schools, being able to put schools, because we have limited land, being able to put schools on smaller parcels of land. But in order to have the urban schools, we really have to do a deep dive and be looking at the kind of zoning that we have. And one of the In regard to some of the zoning that has been talked about recently, I am a proponent of zoning that would be specific for schools and not mixed in with everything else across the city, because that complicates matters greatly.
Okay, Chris?
I think the issue around schools, and particularly the most recent one, is a lot like our issues around traffic. This is a problem we should have seen coming 10 years ago. I think the challenge for the school district and for the city is, as the city is managing growth, to be in communication with the school district and encourage them to start managing and thinking about how they are going to site future school locations. To Mariah's point, it is the school district's responsibility to project its requirements for future schools. It should be doing that, and the city should be working with them to provide information. I also support the notion of neighborhood schools, which may require smaller footprints and smaller schools. And I think that it's time to have a discussion about, as we grow the community, how the school district and the city can partner to figure that out. Now, it is really complicated with the Issaquah School District because the Issaquah School District spans multiple city boundaries. So where do you site? Maybe in Sammamish, or it might be in Renton, or it might be in Issaquah. So this is, again, another issue of a regional problem we need to tackle as a region.
Okay, the next question is about transportation. A year ago, city voters turned down a transportation bond proposed by the city council. Would you recommend going back to the voters for a second try? And if so, what would you like to see on the proposed project list? And this one, Richard will answer first.
No. I don't think we should go back and ask the voters for more money. I think that again, getting back to this whole issue around communication, I don't think the plans that the city had for the use of that money was well communicated. I don't think anybody understood. And I thought there was probably very little trust that the money would be well spent on things that would actually have a fix. So no, I'm not in favor of raising extra tax revenue to fix transportation problems. But we've heard a lot of talk around transportation. I think that the most important thing that we can do is to work hard at regional solutions. None of the problems that we face right now are entirely in the control of this city council. So we have to be the squeaky wheel in the bus, so to speak, at the state and regional level, and make sure that Issaquah's problems get solved when there is money and there is resources allocated towards transportation.
Okay, Mariah, what do you think about giving the voters another try on the transportation bond? Would you propose that you do that? And if so, what would you like to see on the proposed project list?
Well, in regard to the bond that was before the voters, I would not suggest going back and talking to the voters about that, because quite a lot on that, as it had a high voter turnout and a good turnout, it did not have enough to pass, and many of those projects have been very important to council. And a lot of those projects we have found creative solutions and gone forward with. You see a roundabout in front of Trader Joe's. We're talking right now about money being created for Providence Point signalization. We're also talking about Newport Way and what could be done there. I would have to look during the budgeting session to see what I would find would be the top priorities. But some of the things that we need to do are finding creative solutions for some of those transportation and infrastructure projects, and thinking about how we could develop partnerships to go forward. So as of right now, I wouldn't be wanting to propose another bond.
Thank you. Chris, would you go back to the voters for another try on the transportation bond? And if so, what would you like to see on the?
I'm going to agree with my esteemed colleagues up here. I would not support going back to the voters for traffic bond. I think the fundamental problem with the bond as it was written was it addressed many improvements that probably were needed on our city streets, but it was packaged as a traffic improvement bond, and it did nothing to improve traffic. I think we have an opportunity to wring out money from our city budget that can be rechanneled into funding initiatives. I would like to invest in innovative approaches to traffic. I don't think we can pave our way out of this problem. I think there are some critical issues that need to be addressed. I mean, there's nothing I think more glaring than the need to put a signal in at Providence Point. And then finally, what I'd like to do is we have the ability to fund some of these initiatives within our current debt authorization in the city, and we should be doing that so that we can be paying for these improvements to our roads and infrastructure with funds that really are going to be the future residents of Issaquah's job to repay, not our current residents.
Okay. Ryan, you get to answer the question about the transportation bond.
As a spokesperson for the official no committee on that bond, I might have something to say on this. There are two pieces to this question. The first is regional, and we've all heard what we need to do regionally. We need to get the state to finish Highway 18, and King County has got to do something about Issaquah-Hobart Road. That's 30,000 cars and trucks a day coming through our town. The second piece is we need to start being honest as Issaquah itself about every time we approve some new massive growth project, the level of traffic that we ourselves are putting down on the street. And that can be demonstrated in the magic wish list known as the Transportation Improvement Plan. And in case you can't see the number I've highlighted here in yellow, I've got a blown up copy for you. This is the piece that belongs to the city of Issaquah, $218 million. That's what growth has brought us, and that's what we're going to have to pay for to get our own city streets working for the growth that we have already approved. So when we talk about ever thinking about going to the voters and asking them to vote on something, guess what? 218 million reasons why we shouldn't do that and why we really ought to think carefully about what we are doing to our town.
Okay, the next question is from our audience. I forgot to repeat that we're not going to applaud during this.
Discrimination.
The next question is from our audience. It's a related question, and Mariah will answer first. Are the impacts from development being adequately mitigated in Issaquah?
So in regard to growth in general, I guess in what I would want to talk about there is concurrency. Concurrency is basically taking a look at, as development comes in, whether the infrastructure needs are running concurrent with the growth that is happening. And we've had so much growth that has come in, and we're obviously dealing with a lot of issues right now in terms of traffic, in terms of overcrowded schools. And I think that concurrency, while it's a mouthful, is something that we really need to take a closer look at. We need to examine that. We need to look at the codes and the zoning around a lot of the things that we're working with, and make sure that when we're looking at concurrency, that the developers are paying for what is going to come as a result of that development being put on the ground in Issaquah.
So Brian, do you think the impacts from development are adequately being mitigated in Issaquah?
No.
Did I do that backwards? Oops, sorry. I think Chris is supposed to answer that first. Sorry.
I like Brian's answer, though. It was really good.
We'll just skip him then.
I thought you had some kind of super special algorithm here. Anyway, no, they're not, and it's really clear they're not. I mean, you look around, and you can see that our roads have not kept pace with our growth. You can see that our schools have not kept pace with our growth. I'd also contend that our public safety has not kept pace with our growth, and I'd contend that we're only moments away from finding out that our sewer and water supply have not kept pace with our growth. The unfortunate, sad, and tragic part of this is you don't get to go back and get a redo. Once the development is in and you've charged your impact fees, you can't go back and say, shucks. Not only that, you don't get to pay or to assess new developers with higher impact fees to make up for lost time. So what we have to do is we have to give a really hard look at the impacts, and we have to say, this is what it's going to cost for you to develop in Issaquah, and you're going to pay your fair share. And it's going to include roads, it's going to include sewers, it's going to include public safety, it's going to include sewers. And then I think the thing we need to look at is how do we create a regional impact fee to deal with the fact that people here are going to drive on county roads. I'm going to shut up.
Brian, you can finish your answer now.
So, no. And I'm going to hold up my $218 million sign again as one of the reasons why we have issues with transportation concurrency. But whatever else we're going to talk about, what does growth bring to Issaquah? Well, it should bring a public benefit, first of all. And that public benefit should be infrastructure, it should be schools, it should be jobs, and it should be some sort of health and human services campus that we need to talk about. And that's being talked about a lot right now in the community. So how do we get this out of developers? Well, we need to have an ability to charge market rate for development fees that come in. And that means if a developer wants to come in and say, I'd like to build this structure over here, but I need some help from you, the city of Issaquah, Issaquah, the city of Issaquah has to insist that it bring jobs, it bring infrastructure, it bring schools, and it bring a health and human service campus, and it pay for itself. And if it doesn't, we have to be able to say, we can wait. We have already built out this town enough. If we're going to build it out anymore, it has to bring us a benefit.
Thank you. Richard?
Well, I'd like to make this unanimous. No. I was recruited by, I'm the president of our little HOA up in Tallis, and I was recruited by some neighbors to run for city council because the city of Issaquah did such a crappy job of managing the growth that we were experiencing up in Tallis. Many of you, who maybe some of you are not aware of this, but we had a landslide up there while a developer was installing a parcel, was working on a parcel of land. And I'm sure there's a whole host of reasons why the landslide occurred, but the fact is ultimately the city of Issaquah has some responsibility for managing the process and making sure that when a developer agrees to develop a sensitive piece of land, that they do so properly. That didn't happen. And it worries me silly to think that we're going to be going through this huge growth spurt, which we're going to be going through, and there is almost forgive me, a culture of complacency here, where we've been sort of plodding along very much the same we always have been for many, many years, and it's all going to change, and it's going to change rapidly, and I'm not sure we're ready to manage all that growth that's coming.
Thank
and
you.
It's coming.
Okay, next question will be answered by Chris first. The city has put a lot of effort into keeping its historic downtown alive and well. However, parking has been a real issue. Do you have any ideas for a solution for parking in the historic downtown?
We have a bit of a challenge here with downtown. We're trying to create a pedestrian-friendly, plaza-oriented downtown environment, which means removing parking spaces from the street. Interestingly enough, when I talk to people who have businesses in downtown Issaquah and Old Town, what is most important to them is rather than widening sidewalks and creating this plaza, what they would really like to see is for us to retain our street parking and making their businesses more accessible. So I think that the challenge with parking is building some additional parking structures similar to the one we have by the library. But also I'm in favor actually.
Where would you build it? Where would you build it?
On a piece of land that we will identify. Fair question. But I also am in favor of keeping street parking and not widening our sidewalks to create the plaza effect.
Ryan, what would you do about parking downtown?
Well, because I live in Old Town, I love being able to walk to and from and within Old Town. The first thing I'd like to do is get 30,000 regional cars and trucks a day off of Front Street so that we can start, as Issaquah residents, enjoying Old Town. I think that will free up the idea that you can travel to Old Town and find a parking space. But really, we want to be a community that just isn't totally reliant on cars. And so while I do believe that we should have places for people to park, there should also be ways of people to get to Old Town by walking, by biking, safely, I might add, or by taking transit. These are equally as important as our finding additional spaces for parking for our merchants. And so I would like to see us come up with some policies that identify incentives for those types of activities and not just continue to rely on parking spaces for gas guzzlers.
Richard, what would you do about downtown and parking?
Well, I thought Brian's answer was painfully good, and I would agree with you completely. You know, without a doubt, it's a lot of public relations effort for Old Town right now because of SR Front Street, which, you know, Mary Lou identified earlier tonight. And I think that that's caused a lot of the struggles that the businesses are facing. I, too, am in favor of a pedestrian-friendly Old Town. I think that that's part of the charm and character of Issaquah and needs to be preserved. I think that the more parking spaces you build, the more cars that come and the more traffic problems that that arise from that. Not, paving over problems is not always the answer. I think we've got to get creative with where people go and how they move throughout the town. And I think that using public transportation and walking options is the best approach long term.
Mariah, what would you do about parking downtown?
So we talk a lot in the city about walk and roll, and I would echo what Brian talked about. It does not help when we're talking about parking and we have all of the traffic that and all of the cars that are coming down Front Street. One of the votes that I did vote in favor of had to do with taking trucks off of Front Street, and I think that was an important first step. And I think that we have been
commercial trucks.
Yes,
oh, okay.
we have been looking at parking, and one of the ideas that had come through was actually a pretty significantly large parking structure in the Old Town area. So then we started to study what the parking ratios were and that kind of thing. And what it came down to, I only have 15 seconds, so I'll wrap it up. But what it came down to is I think that having a smaller parking structure in the Old Town area might be a good idea, and it would be something similar to the library, where what we have in the library, and not something giant like we talked about originally.
Okay, the next question Brian is going to answer first. For many years, the city's only real economic development focus has been on tourism. How successful has that effort been, and what should the next focus be?
Well, I think it's been successful. I talk to people at work and I talk to people at various places around the country as I've traveled, and they are surprised to know that Costco is headquartered here in Issaquah. And then they say that they've actually been here, they've walked on Tiger Mountain, they've gone to the zoo, and they always talk about the trolley in Old Town, and I think that's fantastic. Can we accelerate and do something better to have more tourists come here? Absolutely. I think that would be a great idea. But really, I think we have to look at all of our economic activities that we have going in Issaquah. It's the responsibility of the City Council to come up with policy that will do just that. So I'd like to see us go back to our Economic Vitality Commission and stir up some of those ideas that came from there and say, what can we do, what can we put in place that this commission identified? Because a lot of those ideas have just sort of been ignored. One of our great citizen commissions. Let's go back. What were some of the things they thought about? Let's see if we can put them in place now.
Okay, thank you. Richard, do you think the city's economic development focus on tourism has been successful? And what do you think the city's next focus should be?
Well, it's interesting because until just now, I didn't know we had a focus on tourism. So it's hard to say whether or not it's successful. I do know Issaquah is a beautiful place, and there's a lot that we have to offer to tourists. I did not know that was a focus for us. But I will say this. I will say that a balanced community needs both places to live, and schools, and trees, and safe streets, and jobs that are balancing the entire community. You can't have one part of the economy that is underserved, and so bringing jobs, worthwhile jobs, to the area is critical to a balanced way of life in Issaquah. So clearly, there's work to be done in there. Without a doubt, Costco headquarters is a great asset to this community. We need more of that, and I'll work to make sure that we get it.
Mariah, what would you say about the economic development focus on tourism, and what would you think the next focus should be?
Well, after spending 3 years on the Economic Vitality Commission for the City of Issaquah, I guess I would disagree that the sole focus has been on tourism. I would say that there are multiple paths that that department and that commission have been focused on. And I think that they have done a good job with tourism, but definitely there is a large focus on bringing jobs into this area. We talk a lot about this city being a place where you could both live and work and play, and that's really, really important to that department and that commission. I sat on the King County the Board of Directors for the King County Economic Development Council, and we talk a lot about the regional work that needs to be done, that's something that can help Issaquah. And we also talk about conversions in zoning. There have been a lot of requests where developers come in, things are zoned for office, and they want to make it into housing. It's not something that I want to see happen. And we also talk a lot about clustering and trying to bring another large employer in within some of the clusters that we already work in, like sports medicine or just the medical groups in general.
Thank you. Chris?
So in terms of tourism, I think we've made some great progress and made Issaquah a destination for some people. I think there's still opportunity to improve that. We have to invest and we have to focus on creating a more robust commercial environment. Solely having Costco as our anchor tenant for commercial business is inadequate. I don't believe that the city has invested sufficient time or energy in driving additional businesses, either commercial or retail, into the city of Issaquah. So I think there's an opportunity for economic development to step up and be creative and find some new ways to do that. That being said, I also want to echo what Mariah said. There's a couple of parcels of land right now that are zoned for commercial that are being forwarded as candidates for conversion into residential, and I think that is a horrible idea. It undermines our position in terms of commercial real estate and clearly exacerbates our problems we already have with the amount of growth happening in the city.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. Did I get everyone on that one?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, you did.
Okay, good. The next question. Can Issaquah's inner-city bus route, number 200, be expanded enough to make a difference with traffic? And if so, how would you pay for it? And if you have any other bus expansion ideas, I'd be glad to hear it in your 1 minute. So Richard gets to answer that one first.
Oh, boy, thanks. Well, inner-city bus service number 200, I guess that would be the bus route that serves Issaquah. And I've got to tell you, I have not given a lot of thought to how we would expand bus service in the area. But I do know that we have a tremendous bus facility in Issaquah, and we need to make better use of that. I noticed that the City Council had worked diligently to provide service there to access the trailheads in Issaquah, and I think that that's the kind of bus service that is a benefit to everyone, not just the people trying to commute from their jobs in Seattle. If we're going to have a pedestrian-friendly city, then I think we need robust bus service to service those pedestrian areas so that we don't have the need to build parking structures in a city that's lacking in available land.
Mariah, would you expand bus route 200? And if so, would you think expansion would make a difference in traffic? And if so, how would you pay for it?
So I think that bus route 200 is critical, and it's something that we've actually talked a lot about, both in terms of when we've talked about expansion of transit, and then during ST3. ST3, that vote brought forward expanded transit, expanded buses, and I think that when we talk about having a walkable city, when we talk about a focus on transit, we have to have all of those options available. In terms of paying for the expanded bus route, that is something that I would want to look at, not only locally in terms of our budget and what we could come up with to offer toward that, but that would be working on partnerships and working regionally. We have, we'll talk a little bit more about regional work later, hopefully something very important to me, but that is critical and something that we need to partner on.
Okay, Chris, what do you think about expanding Bus Route 200? Would it make a difference with traffic, and how would you pay for it? And that's pretty much it.
I don't know that it's Bus Route 200, but I do know that we need to expand neighborhood transit. There is no transit really in Tallis. There is no transit to speak of in South Cove. There are many neighborhoods that have really no transit. So the idea of a walkable city is a great idea. The idea of a bikeable city is a great idea. But with the Highlands on one hill and Tallis on another hill, transit of some sort that brings those people together is the only way that we're going to be able to achieve a goal of that nature. So I think that if we could come up with a network approach to transit that was cost-effective and maybe possibly even demand-driven, we have something that's workable. I also believe that we can fund this with some grant funding. I think that there are some demonstration projects that we might be able to look at in terms of on-demand transit that we could fund with grant funding.
Thank you for mentioning money. That was good. Brian, and what would you do about this?
So when I worked for Microsoft over at CMC on Lake Sammamish, I loved taking the 200 because it took me right to my campus. And it's too bad that I have to work in Bellevue now. 200 is great. If I were sitting on the city council right now, I would say, where's the data? I need to be looking at the data that says that it's going to make sense for us to expand the 200. And then if it does, let's think about it. In terms of the money piece, yes, there are grants for it, but we can't do everything just with grants. At some point, we're going to have to pay for that ourselves. And then it comes to a question, how are we going to do that? What piece of the general fund are we going to tap that will pay for transit? Are we going to do some sort of a sales and use tax that will hit? Are we going to do some piece of existing sales and use taxes that we're going to carve out for that? Are we going to do some tax that we're going to tax employers? I don't know. I don't have all the information to do that. So I need the data. I need to make sure there's enough demand for this. We are a city that is far flung on 2 different mountaintops as well as a busy city, and we do need a better way to connect it.
Okay, Richard, did you want to answer that question?
I already talked about Bus Route 200.
Oh, shoot, I'm
Remember, I was the
sorry.
one
I
who
made a
didn't know
mistake.
Bus Route 200.
That's right.
You want to try again?
Well, I've learned a lot about Bus
try.
Route 200 just listening to the answers here.
Okay, sorry about that. I have a very complicated chart, so I'm
Okay,
trying
that's
to
okay.
follow it.
That's all right.
Okay, so here's another question from the audience. Are there further changes needed in Issaquah City Code regarding land use or zoning or density? Take your pick. If yes, please specify what changes you think should be made in Issaquah City Code. And Mariah gets to answer that one first.
So I recently voted for the moratorium to be put into place so we could look at exactly all of those things. So yes, all of that needs to be looked at. When we talk about growth, and I hear what everyone has been saying, I get it in my city email, I listen to people talk about the reason that they moved here and the feel that they have, the small town charm and the beautiful environment that we have, and some of the growth coming in, the traffic, what we're dealing with schools doesn't seem to match that vision. And we needed to take a pause. And the reason we needed to take a pause is we needed to make sure that growth, when and if it comes, and it is coming, that it needs to be focused in the right location, that it needs to match the vision that we have of that small town charm. So that gets down to architectural fit and design, and that we have the kind of zoning and the kind of land use zoning that we want in place. Housing, everything in growth has come in housing, and we feel like we need to have that focus, the density focused in the central Issaquah area.
Okay, thank you. Chris, are there changes that you think are needed in Issaquah City Code regarding land use or zoning or density? Take your pick. If yes, please specify.
I think fundamentally, the underlying land use and zoning that is outlined in code is fine. I think there are some areas that we need to improve. One is, we talked about earlier, is the idea of impact fees and assessing appropriate impact fees with growth. The second one is the rate at which we give out development variances. So the code says do this, the developer says I don't want to do that, and so we say, oh, that's okay, don't worry about it, we'll give you a variance. So that's significant. And then the third area is around development agreements, where we enter into contracts with developers and give them essentially exceptions from our underlying zoning so that they can achieve higher density. So I think we've got the right things in place. I think we have a vision. I think moving forward, we have to make sure that we are building the Issaquah that we want to build. And I think our code supports that. We just have to execute on that code.
Okay, Brian, what do you have to say about changes needed in code?
Sure. Well, I don't have too much to say about the Issaquah City Code. What I would like to talk about is our comprehensive plan, because our comprehensive plan actually spells out what our city code should be doing for us. What I would like to see us do is actually follow our comprehensive plan. For once, I would like to see administrative adjustments down to an absolute minimum. Those are also known as variances. And I think what we have to do is look at our comprehensive plan as being what we are willing to accept for Issaquah, not simply something that we're going to tolerate. And I think what a lot of our decisions in government here has been is that they're finding ways to make us simply tolerate changes to our land use code, to our policy, to what we're going to accept. And I don't think that's right. I'd like us to go back and look at the comprehensive plan and start following it. And people on the city council should insist that we start following our comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Richard?
I find myself agreeing with Brian again. I think that the comprehensive plan is a good one. It was well thought out. It's well crafted. I don't think it's very well communicated. I'm pretty sure that most people in the room don't even know, the details of it or what it's all about. It spells out where we're supposed to be going in terms of growth. But I'm with Brian. I think the execution around all of this has been lacking. And I don't think we've been holding the developers accountable for the things that we promised we would. I think that we need to do a better job of managing all of that and hold people accountable for the promises that we made. And the communication piece here is really, really key, because it's got to be a dynamic process. Okay, we've got this plan. Well, things are going to start happening and the plan is going to evolve. And how do we hear from you, other than getting in an email or coming to a city council meeting, which can be deadly dull, and appreciate all of you being here, but it's a tough ask to ask people to come to a city council meeting and speak up. There's got to be a way for us to reach out to you so that we have better back and forth communication. It's got to be a dynamic process, managing growth. There's got to be a lot of give and take between us and all of you. And I'm out of time.
Yes,
I have more to say, but I'm out of time.
I bet you all have more to say. So it's time to go to the very interesting part of our evening, when your opponent is going to ask you a question and you're going to answer it. So we're going to start with Brian and Chris. So Brian, you go first and ask Chris a question, and he will answer it.
Can I ask him any kind of question?
It has to be
I'm a
okay for a
Pisces.
family audience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm having a problem with work on recursion. No. So, I have in my hand the Superior Court of State of Washington and King County finding on the conclusions of what's happening with the Talus landslide. And in here it says the city, it's going to get remanded to the city to look at that plat as it was approved, because it was wrongly approved. And I'll give this to you if you want to look at it. If you were sitting on the council right now, what would you do?
So it's actually, I've seen it.
Okay.
Thank you. So it's really interesting. So the owner of Parcel 9 in Tallis sued the city and the owner of Parcels 7 and 8, basically saying that the approval of the final plat on 7 and 8 was flawed because the hearing examiner did not take all of the data into consideration. One of the things that the city council has to do, and I would do if I was sitting here for real, is this is a question of accountability. And so if we have city staff that are not doing their job, and this is a situation where the hearing examiner did not do his job and did not factor in all of the data that was available relative to the hydrology and the geotechnical studies associated with this plat, that's unacceptable behavior. So we need to make sure that we hold everyone accountable. And as this comes back, we're not moving this thing forward until we have gone and turned over literally every stone in every creek that's on Parcel 9, 7, and 8.
Chris, what is your question for Brian?
Mine is a bit of a different take. I am a huge believer in civic engagement and civic involvement, and I admire everybody who is sitting up at this dais with me today for being here. And so my question for you, Brian, is as you've been on this campaign, what have you enjoyed the most?
The thing that I've enjoyed the most is doorbelling in all these different communities and listening to what people have to say. And it's two things. The same two things. They love living in Issaquah, and the second thing is what is going on with our city. So that invigorates me. It gives me a chance to listen because I certainly don't have all the answers, but by listening to what people have to say, I'm going to take a page out of our former mayor's playbook. It takes collaboration, communication, cooperation, and consideration to get something done. And those are the four qualities that I would like to bring to the council after listening to what people have said in the community.
Thank you. So now our position 2 challengers will ask each other a question. Mariah goes first with a question for Richard.
So thank you, Richard. So every year, the council gets a chance to look at the capital improvement plan and look at things by priority. And I'm wondering if you could talk about the top 3 projects that you would be interested in seeing at the top of that list.
That's a very good question. I think that with the growth that's coming to Issaquah, hopefully the well-managed, spectacular, beautiful growth that we're going to see, I think the first thing we've got to look at is the water and sewer infrastructure. I think there's nothing more important that we can do than to have clean water, and I think that those sort of overlooked, less sexy infrastructure projects are going to be critical to growth. It's the kind of thing where you learn about it when it's too late. I think that the second part of it is making sure that we can create traffic projects, we can manage traffic projects that are manageable within our capital budget. We can do the small things extremely well. I think the traffic circle out in Target is a good example of a small infrastructure project with a big impact. I think that we should also look at innovative technology solutions to traffic going forward. So those would be my top priorities. Thank you.
Right.
So now, Richard, what question do you have for Mariah?
So Mariah, you've been on the city council for 2 years, and you were appointed to city council. In the 2 years that you've been a member of this council, what are the things that you are most proud of having accomplished?
Well, I think that really regional work across the board. I sit on several different regional committees. I sat on the the Board of Directors for the King County Economic Development Council, for the Eastside Human Services Forum, which coming out of the Human Services Commission is something I'm just very passionate about. And then the King County Conservation Board, and I sit on the Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee. And so being able to reach out not only to understand all of the issues locally, and it does take a fair amount of time to ramp up on council and get to understand all of the local issues, but then to understand how the regional issues around us are impacting us. And just the other thing that I would probably talk about would be the moratorium. It sounds sort of negative, but it is something I'm proud of because it was so important to take a pause, and all of the work plans that are surrounding that are something that I'm just really feeling good about. And that's a big reason that I would love to retain my seat on council, because I feel like we're right in the middle of those work plans.
Okay, now we have closing remarks. Everyone gets 1 minute to share anything that they feel like they haven't had a chance to say. We'll start with Chris.
Okay. Again, thank you all for being here tonight. It was a great discussion. Donna, thank you for doing such an awesome job of keeping us on track. That was no small feat. In my opening remarks, I talked about the need for vision and accountability, and over the course of the evening, I think that we've seen that we're not going to solve the problems that we have today with the same solutions and the same thinking that we used that created them. We have to address these problems. It's imperative for maintaining our charm of our city and the quality of life that we've come to expect. We must recognize that our growth is part of our future. We may not like it, but we can't stop it. But we have to manage it. We have to manage the traffic that's going to come with it. We must ensure that developers pay their share as we move forward, and we must look for innovative approaches to our challenges. We must not only address our current problems, but we also must look to the future, and we need a city council that has a view to the problems that are on the horizon so we can solve them before they start to impact the citizens of Issaquah. It's been great to have a conversation with you, and I would appreciate your vote in November.
Brian?
I'm not a politician. Some of my answers are not very polished. I care a lot about our town, our Issaquah, but we all do, all of us up here tonight. We just have a different point of view. My goal here tonight was twofold. First, to bring attention to the issues we're facing and possibly some solutions. And second, to get the community conversation escalated, to get you to be continually interested and involved and curious and concerned in the direction of our town and its future, and to take action. I hope I succeeded in at least one of those missions this evening, but in the end, this is an election, and as your city council member, I promise to always listen, keep an open mind, and work tirelessly to represent you. So I will need your vote in November. Thank you, and I hope I have earned your support this evening and your vote. I have a website, www.bw4, that's the number 4, Issaquah.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Richard?
Well, I had a couple of thoughts here. If I could remember what they were, I'd start speaking them. But I think that I know what I wanted to say. I wanted to start by saying that I am not running against Mariah. She seems like a very fine person, very kind and considerate. But the way our election process is set up, I have to run against somebody. And so I'm running for seat number 2. But what I am running for is a seat at the table, because I think I bring a lot of creative energy, a lot of solutions. I will work hard to find the right answers. I will listen well. I promise to you tonight I'm going to set up an advisory panel made up of HOA presidents and community leaders so that we can hear from Sammamish, we can hear from downtown, we can hear from Tallis. All of those people will have a seat at a table, and we'll meet virtually or we'll meet personally, whatever it takes to pull thoughts together so that it's not just, and then we're going to push, I think, ideas. We're going to communicate much better this direction. So I'm asking for a seat at that table. I will work hard for you. I'm also here. I'm going to do what I did the last council meeting, or the last candidate forum we had. I'm going to endorse Mary Lou Pauley for mayor. I think we're lucky to have somebody so smart and energetic as Mary Lou, and I heartily endorse her. But she's going to need somebody like me at the opposite end of the table, asking the hard questions, holding people accountable, looking for the creative solutions. And I ask for your vote. Please find me on Facebook, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mariah?
I just wanted to thank everyone again for coming out this evening. This has just been great to be able to engage, and hopefully I'll get a chance to meet some of you as we're heading out. We need to prioritize traffic solutions and balancing our growth to really maintain that small town charm and the vision that I think that we all share for the city. And I also would really like to see us enhance our community engagement and our transparency. So this is a great start to be able to talk with everyone, but we need to do even more of that. I am the newest member to council. I've been on a year and a half, and there's been a lot to learn across a broad spectrum, and both through my background with commission work, my role on city council, and the regional work that I've done, and with my just outside of city council, my consultancy work. I think that I've really developed a way to work collaboratively and to be able to focus on the kinds of solutions that we need. We do need to do better in some areas, and I feel like now I've had the opportunity to find out where the impactful change could happen. I've had a lot of votes that have gone toward impactful change, and I'd love to have your vote in November so I could continue to fight for our home.
Thank you so much to all the candidates who spoke this evening. I hope that everyone found this very interesting. I certainly did, and I don't live in Issaquah, so thank you for being willing to serve your city and represent your community. I hope that, well, you can't all win, but good luck in this. The Cable TV Commission and their staff have been recording tonight's forum. It will be replayed every day until the November election.
Oh, my God.
So you're going to be famous even, yeah, in Issaquah. It's being played on City Channel 21 and also streamed on the city's website. So tell your friends and family members to tune in so they can become better informed voters. And thank you for the audience tonight and for your good questions, and good night.